Okay, and I'm live. Okay. I feel like we need like a bell almost. Albert's yapping. No, okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, for being here. If you had told me, like, 5 years ago when I started writing this book, that there would be, like, actual real life people that cared about it and that liked it, I don't think I would have fully believed you. I think I would have hoped for that, but I don't think I would have fully believed you on that front. So the fact that not only do I have like people in my real life that like it and that have read it, but also, as you'll see in the magazine, there's like testimonials from other people who sent their comments in, who sent letters in, and even though I'm no Stephen King, I'm not getting rich from this, but honestly, those comments and the love people have for this book is more that, I mean, it would be nice to get rich from this, but those comments are worth more in the long run. So now I am going to read part of the book. Some of you have already read the book, so you'll know what scene that I'm talking about. Others have not read it yet, so this will almost be like a little preview for when you do read it, and it'll almost like spark your interest in a sense. So this scene is from chapter 20 of the book. This is a scene where the main character, Logan, he goes to his ex-best friend's house. They have been paired together for a science fair project, and they, of course, cannot stand each other, but they used to be best friends, so like their moms are best friends. So he goes to her house to work on this project. I really like this scene because I feel like it lays the groundwork for a lot of intrigue of like future, kind of like, why don't they like each other? How is this going to turn out? And I just like the character dynamics a lot in this chapter. I feel like this was the first chapter that I really found Logan's narrative voice. So I will. Hi. So I will be reading that chapter. So, okay. There is an audiobook for the book, and while I do like to think that I have a pretty good narrative voice, I'm also not the audiobook narrator. That one is very good, though. If you like audiobooks, I definitely think you should check it out. It's available on Audible. So, okay. Chapter 20. Mom, I told you I can just talk to Molly at school. Don't be silly, Logan. Like I said, I've been wanting to check in on Raina, and this will give you the perfect opportunity to work on your project. Mom picked me up from therapy, which was a surprise to me since Zach was the one who dropped me off. I know she said she could take me to Molly's afterwards, but I was hoping she'd been blowing smoke. But no, apparently not. And now we're parked outside Molly's house, and I'm hoping and praying she has a student council meeting today and isn't home. I'm sure it'll be just like old times, Mom says. Just like old times? Like when? When we were 6 and we got fake married? That is a memory that will forever haunt me. Mom takes the cherry pie I've been holding since she picked me up, because apparently she is incapable of visiting anyone without bringing a freshly baked pie, and gets out of the car, leaving me stewing. I bang my head against the headrest and let out a soft groan. What if I just stayed in here the whole time? Molly's probably at a student council meeting anyway. Mom knocks on the window, motioning for me to get out. Fine. I take a deep breath, grab my backpack, and reluctantly step out of the car. I hang back a little ways until Mom snaps her fingers at me to step up beside her on the porch. Are we sure it's okay to just show up unannounced? And what if they're not even home? I called Raina last night, she tells me. She said it would be lovely to see us again. Great. Perfect. Wonderful. It'd be lovely to see Molly again. I'm about to offer another protest when the door opens. Hello? Mrs. Pearson gives us a soft smile. I wasn't sure if it would be all of you or just... Oh, Lucas is still at work and Zach's off with his girlfriend, Mom says, offering Mrs. Pearson a hug. It's nice to see you, Raina. How was the summer? Mrs. Pearson shrugs, her smile faltering. Busy. She takes the pie from Mom, stepping aside so we can put our shoes on the rack by the front door. Mom slips on a pair of black flip-flops next to the rack. Molly once called the flip-flops chinelas, and I used to think it was so cool how her family had inside shoes that were different from their outside shoes. I don't know if any of these will fit you, Logan. You've gotten so tall. I grew 3 inches over the summer, and it's been even longer than that since I've seen her. I shrug. I'm fine in my socks. She nods, giving me a quick side hug. We weren't sure if Molly had student council today, so if she's not here... Oh, no, that's on Wednesdays. Molly's just upstairs. Mrs. Pearson turns towards the stairs and calls, Molly, Logan and his mother are here. I imagine Molly rolling her eyes and letting out one of her signature sighs before leaving the room. There she is, at the top of the stairs a few seconds later. She's still in the sweater and skirt she wore to school earlier today, but her hair has been let out of its ponytail, falling in waves around her shoulders. If this were a movie, this would be the moment when the music kicks in and the girl who was ugly 5 minutes ago walks down the stairs in slow motion, looking like a total knockout, and the guy watches her with the same look Calvin gives Natalie when she breathes. But this isn't the movies. Molly's not ugly. Not at all, really. In fact, it's a little unfair that she's gotten so pretty since becoming a teenager, while I am sporting a malnourished chic look. Pretty or not, though, she's annoying as hell. So I can't say I'm watching her like I just realized what love is. In fact, I probably have the same look on my face she has now. A sort of, why are you here look. I wonder if her mom told her we were coming. Mom's not even here to notice because she's busy putting the pie in the kitchen. Mrs. Pearson clears her throat, and I can tell Molly stifling a sigh. Hey. Hi. Mom comes back from the kitchen then. Please let her notice the tension. Let her decide that, you know what, this was a terrible idea, so let's go home. Instead, she smiles and gives Molly the same hug Mrs. Pearson gave me. My goodness, you're so big. Calvin's words from the barbecue drift back. I look away, hoping my cheeks aren't red. She's talking about her height, you perv. Molly smiles a little. Hi, Mrs. Clark. Honey, I've known you since you were 2, okay? How many times have I told you to just call me Bernadette? The Pearsons moved to Parkview 11 years ago, and when Mom found out they had a kid my age and lived on the street behind us, she had to come over and introduce herself. Yes, she brought them a pie. I obviously don't remember this first meeting, but the adults hit it off, and Molly and I became inseparable. There's not much standard for friendship when you're 2. Molly scrunches her nose, making my mom laugh. Well, we'll leave you 2 to get started, Mom says. No going into your room, okay? Mrs. Pearson tells Molly. Molly blushes and screws up her face like that's the grossest thing anyone could say. Wasn't planning on it. I'm blushing. I can feel it. But I'm also a little insulted. It's not like I had high hopes of hanging out in Molly Pearson's bedroom, but did she have to look that disgusted? Our mothers head into the kitchen, leaving us alone in the most awkward silence in history. My mom has this rule about no boys in my room, Molly explains quietly. I nod. What am I supposed to say to that? I'm allowed to have girls in my room, but Mom always tells me to keep the door open. Besides, the only girl who ever comes in my room is Piper, and Cal's always with her. I almost say something about how I used to be allowed in her room. When we were 5, we made countless blanket forts up there. But that feels weird to mention. I'm surprised she hasn't just gone back upstairs or said something annoying. I glance at her. She honestly just looks kind of tired today. Do you have your notebook so we can keep talking about the project? Why is it so much harder to talk to her when we're not jabbing at each other? She sighs, and any pity I may have felt about her being tired or whatever has faded away. Obviously, I have my notebook, she says, shaking her head. Let me go grab it. She runs back up the stairs. I decide to make my way to the living room, trying not to feel awkward as I sit on the edge of her couch. The living room looks virtually the same as the last time I was here. I set my backpack down on the floor, and a soft purr comes from underneath the couch. I jump as a black cat strolls out from underneath. Leo. Molly's had this cat since we were in preschool, after we found him as a newborn kitten in her backyard. I remember her begging her dad to let them keep it. Finally, after making sure the thing's mother wasn't still around, her parents caved. She named him after one of her favorite constellations. I reach down, scratching Leo behind the ears. I'm surprised he lets me. Maybe he still remembers me. Oh, you found Leo. I look up. Molly's peering at me from a spot on the stairs. I nod as she makes her way down, flipping through her notebook. Yeah, I still remember when we found him. She laughs. Surprised neither of us ended up with scratches. I laugh too. It's a weird moment. An oddly nice moment. But then it seems like she realizes who she's talking to and her smile vanishes. She comes down the rest of the way and sits on the other side of the couch, so I either have to scoot or lean way over to see what's in her notebook. I don't want to do either of those things, so I just stay where I am. Okay, she says, stopping on a page. Our objective is to figure out how a source of light, like a star, will change with distance. Like how the sun is like lethal if you're too close to it, but if it's 90-something million miles away, it's fine. 93 million miles, she says. But yeah, kind of. She glances down at her notes. Basically, we're going to have a few different light bulbs, and then you're going to download the light sensor on your phone. Why can't you download it? I know I'm being annoying, but I can't help it around her. She doesn't miss a beat, because it won't work on my phone. Anyway, with the sensor, we'll be able to tell exactly how much the intensity changes the farther away we get from the light bulb. She starts rattling off the materials we'll need. Stuff like a dark room, black paper, a tripod, and a bunch of other things. Finally, she looks up at me. Any questions? I blink. So we're recreating stars? I wait for her to sigh, but she shrugs. Not exactly. She stops suddenly and shakes her head. I think we have some light bulbs in the attic. I follow her up the stairs, hoping her mom doesn't get the wrong idea, and up into the attic. Molly rifles through a box labeled light bulbs and magic marker, while I look around the space. I've never seen it before. I don't think I've ever been up here. She pulls out a big light bulb from the box, placing it next to her on the floor. Yeah, well, we weren't allowed up here as kids, and then you ditched me before we were old enough, so she trails off, just letting that hang in the air between us. I want to ask her what she means, ask her what exactly I did to make her hate me so much, but something tells me to keep my mouth shut. Maybe it's how tired she looked when she came downstairs earlier. She's got a row of 3 light bulbs next to her, and there's that thick, silent tension in the room now. I decide to busy myself by opening another box, hoping there's something else we can use. But I'm pretty sure nothing in here will help with our project. Hey, does your mom keep all of your old clothes? She looks up, and now I peer at the writing on the box I'm digging through. Molly's clothing, age 7. She doesn't like throwing things out, Molly says with a shrug. She keeps insisting it'll be useful when I have my own daughter someday. She shakes her head and scoffs. Like I'm ever having kids. That comes as a surprise to me. I remember Molly being obsessed with this stupid little doll when we were around 4 or 5. She used to carry that thing around everywhere and even match clothing with it. Everyone thought it was the cutest thing in the world, the way she pretended to be the thing's mother. She named it Cassie, after the Cassiopeia constellation. How did she even know what that was anyway? Of course, I thought Cassiopeia was a stupid name, so I called it Pia instead. I can't say Molly was thrilled with me. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see Pia's arm sticking out from one of the boxes labeled Molly's Toys. I lean over and pull it out. Ugh, the stupid thing is still as creepy as ever. I hold up the doll, its matted hair waving around as I do so. Pia remembers otherwise. Molly snorts, but quickly covers it up with a cough. Her name is Cassie. She walks over and plucks the doll from my hands, then dumps it back in the box. Good riddance. I found the light bulbs we need. She holds up a handful. Anyway, I'm going to taste your mom's pie. Stay up here if you want. I don't doubt she'd close the attic door and leave me up here if I don't follow her. It's weird, you know? To sit in the living room of the girl you can't stand and eat pie with her? Yeah, it's super weird. We're not saying anything, just sitting here eating pie together. Our moms ventured out into the porch while the 2 of us are up in the attic, so it's just Molly and me in here. Molly's phone buzzes then. It's Mikey, she says, checking the message. He's asking me if he should bring his dad's strobe lights to homecoming. Oh, Lord. Homecoming. Principal Franklin announced the day for the Parkview Middle's fall formal last week. Someone figured out the dance is happening at the same time the high schoolers have their homecoming, plus it lines up with Spirit Week and the dance, so everyone started calling it a homecoming dance. It's stupid, I know. She thumbs back a response, then puts her phone down. It took forever to settle on a theme. Do high school homecomings even have themes? She ignores me. Avery wanted a night in Paris, while Chloe wanted it under the sea themed. Mikey wanted a club theme. Bronwyn wanted some vintage Hollywood theme. Blake wanted some masquerade theme because his older sister just read Romeo and Juliet. Now he thinks he's more cultured than us or whatever. I snort at that. Blake Jones is just about the most stuck-up kid I know. He's the kind of kid that can't fathom the concept of not being right about everything. Remember when he said he was 97% right all the time? I asked. Guess Molly forgets for a moment that she's talking to me because she laughs. Yeah, more like 97% right 2% of the time. She stops giggling and goes on. Anyway, I had seen a Night Under the Stars theme online and it looked beautiful. So we had Miss Patterson put everyone's suggestions in a bowl and picked one out at random. She takes a deep breath. Well, she ended up picking mine, but now Mikey's asking about his stupid strobe lights and she trails off, realizing who exactly she's spilling her guts to. Why am I telling you this? You probably don't even know who half the student council kids are. It stings a little, because the truth is I was kind of invested in the drama happening with the dance, but Molly's not wrong. I don't know most of the student council kids. Parkview Middle decided to host the election on Instagram over the summer. Don't ask me why. I didn't even interact with the posts. I do know Avery because we're in the same math class, and I know Blake because he's kind of hard to miss, no matter how badly you wish you could. Who the hell is Bronwyn? What kind of name is that anyway? And Mikey? Maybe if I saw him, I'd recognize him, but the name doesn't ring any bells. I want to say something about how I didn't mind her talking about this stuff, but that feels weird to tell her. I forgot how much this girl could ramble. Whatever semi-nice moment passed between us is gone now. We've both descended into another awkward silence. I turn around, trying to get a look outside, hoping Mom will decide it's time to go home. She's deep in conversation with Mrs. Pearson. Only, is Mrs. Pearson crying? Eavesdropping is rude, Molly says. I jump, turning back. Sorry. I want to ask Molly if she knows what's going on out there, but it doesn't feel like my place to ask. She checks her phone again and gets up from the couch, not looking at me. I have to go talk to Avery about stuff for Spirit Week. Then she disappears up the stairs, leaving me alone. Thank you. So the second part of this hour essentially will be for a Q&A. If anyone has any questions about the book, about the writing process, what I have planned next. So whoever wants to ask their questions, they can feel free to go ahead. Pretend we're in school, raise your hand. Yes?
How long did this process take you?
So I started writing the book when I was 17. I started writing it I planned the book the summer before my senior year of high school. And then I wrote draft 1 over the course of 4 months. And then draft 2 was 8 months. Draft 3 was about the same. I attempted getting an agent, getting it traditionally published, doing all the fancy stuff. But they are correct when they say that every author faces rejection, because I did actually get a publisher that was interested, but after reading the book, they were like, oh, but something about them not doing it justice. And so they're like, so we'll have to pass on it. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's too good for I still don't know what that means. But then eventually I had somebody read it that wasn't in my inner circle, that wasn't my friend or my mom, and someone that doesn't have any kind of personal connection to me. Once it was seen by eyes that weren't close to me, I realized that version of the book was not ready for everyone else to see. So I rewrote it. I rewrote that, and that version is what this is what is this final copy. I did get an editor and did the whole thing, but from start to finish, from the planning stage to publication, took me about 4 years. Yeah. Yes, Jojo.
So who's the person who listened to you yak?
Next question, Tyler. Yes.
Wanted to ask,
Uh-huh.
how do you overcome like the writer's block issue?
That's a fantastic question. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So what helps sometimes is just kind of changing the method of how I write. So I tend to just usually write on my computer, but if I'm having really bad writer's block, it helps to like go to the library or to like Starbucks or something, and then just not take my computer with me, but take a notebook with me and write the scene longhand. Because I'm less concerned about perfection that way. I'm just kind of writing what comes to mind. And if you see, my notebook is in my bag here, I believe. Is it? No, I got it. Okay. So my notebook here is kind of full of, when I write a scene, you can see, I don't know if you can see, but there's stuff like crossed out. Because I'm like, oh no, that's just, this scene actually didn't even make it into the book. But I wrote it out and then I was like, this isn't gonna work. But yeah, so just kind of changing the method in which I write, changing my location instead of like, if I usually write at my desk, going out to write. The Pomodoro method of working, that helps a lot, where it's like you set a timer for like 15 minutes and you write for 15 minutes, and then once the timer goes off, you take a 5-minute break. And then after the 5-minute break, you go back to writing for 15 minutes. And it's almost like it breaks it up so it's less daunting. Because sometimes you're sitting there and you're just thinking like, I have so much to write today, and you're looking at the blank page and you're like, actually, I don't want to do this today. I also always have coffee when I'm writing. I like can't write without a little drink. So, but yeah, it's not completely foolproof because I'm in the middle of writer's block right now, but that is how I kind of helped finish this. Yeah. Noemi.
Is there anything you would like to go back and change in the story?
I think not so much the story itself, but as I discover new music that I think the characters would listen to, I'm like, oh, I wish that I knew that before I wrote the book so that like I could mention it, or like I've been getting really into like 2000s like skater boy music, which I think Logan is like, that's like his music taste to a T. And I'm like, oh man, I never wrote down that he likes the All American Rejects, like, which of course I can do in the second one. But yeah, I think just stuff like that I'm like, or I'll write something in the second one and I'm like, this would have made sense to mention in the first one, but I can't go back and change it now. So, Angie?
Is there a scene in the book that you're like, after you go, like, wow, I'm really proud of this?
So in the first one, the climax of the book was kind of like, it was, very few people know what the original climax of the book was. Noemi knows, Jojo knows, my mom knows. And it was like really dramatic. It was like really over the top, and it just didn't really fit with the rest of the book. So when I rewrote it for draft 4, I changed it. And I just feel like the little subtle changes I made to that scene, I really like the way that scene turned out. And like, I can picture it clearly. If it was a movie, I can picture how, like, what song would be playing. I just think it would be, I really like that scene in particular. And then I also really, really like there's a scene where Logan and Molly go stargazing. I've always liked that scene. That scene has stayed largely the same since the beginning. Yeah, so I think those two scenes, because sometimes I finish writing a chapter or a line and I'm like, sometimes it's like, oh, I wrote that, okay. And other times it's like, I wrote that. So those two for sure were ones that I was like, oh, I wrote that. Celeste?
I think it's really easy when you're writing to get attached to scenes. So
Yes.
what would you say was the hardest change you had to make from the beginning draft to final draft?
Oh, I know there was something that I was like really sad that had to go. Oh, so it started with a prologue initially. You know this.
Yes.
And you know this. That there was initially a prologue that started. It featured Logan at like 8 years old, and it was kind of the first time. So the book is about Logan like struggling with anxiety and depression and OCD, and the prologue was kind of the first time that he really had an episode big enough to like fully worry his parents enough to the point where they like start trying to get answers. And that's still part of the backstory. It still gets mentioned, but it's no longer a full scene. It was like, I really liked the prologue. I thought it did a lot of backstory. But when I took writing, when I graduated and then I decided to like take writing classes. And in that class, we had to share part of our like own personal projects. And with said projects, when I shared the prologue, pretty much everyone said it's good, but it's unnecessary. And initially I was like, well, they don't know what they're talking about, this and that. But honestly, and the way this one opens is different even than when the prologue was first cut. But yeah, I think the prologue is one of the things that I'm like, oh, I wish I could have kept that. There was also a line at some point where Logan, like, he recalls a line from a TV show where, like, the main guy tells the girl, like, oh, you're my daily meteor shower, and he kind of comments on the fact that that's, like, something that can only happen in movies, because if you try telling Molly that, she'd laugh at him. And then I looked up when the book takes place in 2017, and I looked up when that episode came out, and that episode came out in 2018. And so I was like, I can't have this in here. So I ended up changing. There's a similar sentiment at some point, but I was sad to lose that line. So yeah. Laura?
First of all, this is really good.
Oh, thank you.
Your parents will be so proud.
Thank you.
So proud. It's so good that I'm like, I envision it in a movie. Like, I can picture it.
I'm glad.
So would you be open, like, to let this become a movie?
Of course. That's my dream. Let's. Oh, okay. So I have in my mind, like, I started writing the book when I was 17, and the characters of Logan and Molly have been in my head since I was about 14. So the people that I picture are all now grown adults that cannot play teenagers. But if this were a perfect world and I were casting kids that, like, they would be the right age regardless of time, Logan would be played by Logan Schroyer, who plays teenage Kevin in This Is Us. Molly would be played by Olivia Rodrigo, kind of during her High School Musical days, funnily enough, Olivia Rodrigo's new album comes out next month, and just like the vibes and the songs and stuff, I'm using that album a lot to market Molly's book. So the next book will be Molly's perspective. And then Logan's friend Calvin would be played by, I think this is the youngest of the cast, like the only one that could probably pull it off, Mason Thames. He had a really big movie year last year. He was in How to Train Your Dragon. He was in a movie called Regretting You. Then Emma Myers as Piper, who is Calvin's twin sister. Emma Myers she was in the Minecraft movie, but I don't know, she just looks exactly how I picture Piper. Sophia Wiley from the High School Musical, the musical, the series, as Natalie. Logan's parents would be played by Milo Ventimiglia and Mandy Moore. The therapist, Dr. Reyes, would be played by Oscar Isaac. And I think Elliot would be played by Charlie Plummer from, he was in a movie called Words on Bathroom Walls. He was in the TV show for the book Looking for Alaska. I think he would do a really good job as Elliot too. I think that's it for like the major characters. Oh, and Ivan and Octavia, who, for those who haven't read it, are Logan's like intrusive thoughts. So I decided to personify those. And in my mind, if this was a movie, they would cast like actual actors for them, and they would kind of just like pop up in random scenes. So for that, I picture Anya Taylor-Joy as Octavia and Jamie Campbell-Bower as Ivan. I think that's it for like the big characters. Yeah, Maya.
Well, first, I'll put it over here, because I think it's kind of hard to see.
Okay.
So the quick question, you go first.
Oh.
No.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Pues sabemos que tienes un gran talento y que
Ujú.
no es nada fácil.
Gracias.
¿De dónde te inspiraste? ¿O cómo dijiste, yo también puedo hacer algo así?
El papá le inspiró.
No. Yeah, all the years doing math homework, that really inspired me. No. So I have always liked books. I've always liked stories. And I always liked writing and like making my own stories. I remember in like I have photos of like my old little stories that I would write in kindergarten, and they were bad. They made no sense. It was just, this is a penguin and he likes snow. Or this is my mom, and it was a drawing of my mom. But I always liked making stories. And then every year in school, my report card would mention something about my writing. When I was about 10, I decided to like seriously write something. And by seriously write something, I mean I wrote a crossover fan fiction between The Hunger Games, Divergent, and the Disney XD show Lab Rats. It was bad. It was half plagiarized. It was half plagiarized and not good. But I was like, I'm a writer now. And I decided, then when I was in 6th grade, I wrote like my first like original story. There was not a fan fiction, but it was plagiarized. Most of it was plagiarized anyway. The first line is quite literally the first line of The Hunger Games. That book was bad. And then throughout middle school, I wrote so much. I always was writing something, and most of it is bad. But there are good things that came out of that, my now current career, and also some characters that I write, like Logan and Molly, those characters existed in a story that I wrote when I was 14. And then Elliot existed in a story I wrote when I was 13. But yeah, so I've just kind of always liked writing. And it wasn't until I was graduating that I said, okay, I think I want to make this like my career. Because I was just kind of writing for myself. The thought of people I knew in real life reading my writing was so like, no, like I did not want people like knowing what I was writing. But it was around graduation. When I graduated is around the time that I started getting very sick, and I had a lot of doctor's appointments, and so I couldn't work. Like I didn't graduate and then immediately get a job. So this was something that I could do. This was something I was already doing. And then at some point I like bit the bullet and opened an Instagram for it, and people got really invested in it. So yeah, I think there was just kind of like a lot of circumstantial things throughout the years that made me want to pursue this. Maya, no.
So, one of the things I know just from the book and then also from what you said is some of the books that you referenced were had encouraged, saying like people should read this. And I also noticed that for praise, at least like two of the authors that you had listed had also said praise for your book. The one especially for like Wesley King and Beth
Vrabel, yes.
So I was just curious, what was like? How did you feel? Or like, what was the whole like? I guess like the waves of emotion when you saw like, oh my gosh, different.
I know. That was so. When you do author blurbs, you have to ask them. Which I would send an email out, and I'd be like, "Hi, I sent you a letter when I was a teenager, and now I have a book. So do you want to read it? Do you mind like offering me a blurb so I can put on the back of the book?" And I was always this like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I sound so stupid. But a lot of them said yes. even the ones that said no, it wasn't because they weren't interested. It was because they were like on deadline with their own books. And I was like, that is so fair. Like that, you don't even worry about that. But knowing that like Wesley King wrote a book called O.C. Daniel that I read when I was 13, and that book like changed my life. And so knowing that that author read this book and thought it was good, that was a crazy feeling. Beth Rabel is another author I read a lot of that like summer before freshman year of high school. And not only did she do the blur, but she also sent me a separate email, like referencing certain things in the book that she really liked, saying that the book made her cry, which I thought was really cool. Beth Rabel, she wrote Bringing Me Back. Yeah. John David Anderson is another author that his books like heavily influence the way I write about specifically adolescent boys. And just knowing that he also liked my book is crazy. But yeah, don't like seeing people that I looked up to in their writing and I like think like they're really great writers. That was knowing that they see me as almost one of them now that was really cool. Yeah. Mark?
I admire writers
Mhm.
like musicians.
Yes.
They're really talented.
Thank you.
And I like that. Are you allowed to say the name of the book?
The next book, yes. So the next book actually is titled All the Things I Wish You'd Do. It follows the character of Molly, who we met in this chapter that I just read. I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't read the book, but there's a reason why she was very standoffish, why her mom was crying at the end, and that is a very, very big part of the second book. I'm sure this is just obvious based on how stories go, but Logan and Molly do eventually fall for each other. That's just how these stories go. So the second book follows a lot of kind of navigating that, like, it's a different type of relationship than, because they were friends when they were kids, but it's a different type of relationship now. And navigating how awkward that is, especially they're so young. And also, like, there's just so much change happening in Molly's life. And I'm loving the second book. I have beta readers that are also loving it a lot. And I'm really, really excited for that. That releases in September. So, yeah, it already has a cover. It looks so good. It's pink, which is why I'm using Olivia Rodrigo's new album a lot as marketing. Angie?
So I know you mentioned you had the characters, like the main cast characters,
Uh-huh.
you're 14.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about like developing or creating the side characters? Like, do you develop them for sake of like plot progression or for like set up for future books or other process?
So as for the core 5, I definitely I know what. So the series will end up being 5 books, and each of the main 5, Logan, Molly, Calvin, Piper, and Natalie, will get their own books, their own stories. And so for those 5 characters, I know like at least the basics of what their story is going to be. And so I'm kind of laying that groundwork from the beginning. I know I just was getting like messages from someone that reread the book. They read an arc when I was offering those, and then they reread this recently because they just bought it. And saying like, oh, I like how you mentioned this and this and this, that like you're foreshadowing for Piper's book or for this or for that. When it comes to like side characters, like the parents or Dr. Rhea, Zach, Becca, Elliot. Elliot actually has his own story, which if you've read this in full, you know that Elliot's story is very, very sad. And that book it's actually right here. It's very short, but it's very sad. Maya says that it packs a bigger punch because it's so short. But Elliot already had his story when I wrote this book, like when I wrote this version, because Elliot was not in the original versions. So I already knew his story from there. And when it comes to the other characters, I think depending on their level of like relevance to the story. So like obviously Logan's family is more relevant. Zach's story is something that I do like. I knew that, and there's a scene towards the end where like that all kind of comes out. And then there's like the characters that Logan meets at the treatment center, like the kids in group therapy. I'm actually kind of sad that those are not the main cast of characters because they're a lot of fun, and I wish that I wrote a story about them. Maybe someday I will. But there's kind of always, there's like the main characters and then there's their families, and then there's always like a secondary like side cast of characters. So in Molly's book, that's the student council kids. She mentions them all here, and they are so much fun to write. They're so chaotic, but they're so much fun. In Calvin's book, Calvin is an athlete, so those will be like the other jocks on his team. Piper's a theater kid, so those will be like the other like drama kids. Natalie's a cheerleader. So there's kind of set up for future casts of characters. But their relevance and like how developed they are really does depend on like plot progression, how like in this they're often plot devices, essentially. Yeah. Who else? Celeste, I saw that you had your hands up a couple times.
Yeah,
Did
I just wanted, my question was like, what inspired these characters? Like, their backgrounds, like, what inspired you to come up with them?
Yeah, so even though Logan did exist in my head since I was about 14, he changed a lot. His very first version was different than this one, but I think the inspiration to write about mental illness in particular came from it's inspired a lot by my own personal experiences. And when I was 16, I was in like a really bad spiral, and I mentioned one of the books that changed my life when I was growing up was called O.C. Daniel, which is inspired by the author's own experiences growing up with OCD. And I was rereading that book, and I was like, what if I wrote a book about like similar to my experiences? Like, what if I did that? And so I put it aside. I started thinking about it more. And so since the character of Logan had already existed, I always liked his character. I always liked his voice. I knew that there was more I could do with him, even if that story got abandoned. And so I was like, what if I put him in this story? What if he's given that problem? And so that's how Logan came to be. Molly existed in that story, and so it was just very weird to write about Logan without Molly, especially since like their backstories are so entwined with each other. So that's how she came up. Molly is like her story is very, very similar to the original version. Calvin, Piper, and Natalie came from I always liked the idea of like a trip gone wrong type story, whether it's like a comedy or a thriller where like someone dies. There's a book that I read recently called 5 Survive. It's a thriller of like a bunch of teenagers going on a spring break trip, and they get held hostage. It's very good, but not the same target audience as this book, but it's very good. But I always liked the idea of like a vacation gone wrong story. And so initially Calvin, Piper, and Natalie existed in like a more comedic version where like Calvin and Piper, there's twins, their like family goes on a family trip, and like Piper's allowed to bring her friends with her, and so that's how Natalie's there. But that never really came about. I do have a notebook that has those notes of those original characters in them. And then eventually I started thinking about it as a thriller, and specifically a like murder mystery that takes place on a cruise ship. And Piper kind of got pushed to the side on that one. That was more about Calvin and Natalie. But like none of those stories were coming to fruition. I like had the basics down, but I didn't have enough push to actually write them. And so then when I was developing this one, I was like, well, let's take those 3 and let's move them here. Let's put them in this story. And that's how the core 5 kind of came to be. Yeah. Anyone? Oh, Amani?
What's your main inspiration for writing scenes?
Oh, good question. I don't know. It kind of changes. Movies and TV definitely help a lot. to kind of piggyback off the writer's block question, something that would help too is watching a movie or a book, or not a movie, a movie or a TV show that was like kind of similar in tone or in characters or something to the book, and that would kind of now give me ideas for like, okay, now I know how I'm going to do the next scene. So like for this one, the movie Words on Bathroom Walls was a really, really big inspiration, just in like character, like tone of voice and that kind of stuff. So watching that movie was really like would inspire a lot of scenes. Watching the TV show This Is Us would inspire a lot of scenes because the actors for teenage Kevin, Jack, and Rebecca are who I picture as Logan and his parents. And so watching those episodes and those scenes would offer a lot of inspiration. But sometimes it's music, sometimes I'm literally just going about my day and I'm like, oh, this could be a good scene. So it really depends. There's a scene in this book where Logan goes to group therapy, and that scene was inspired by there's an episode of the old detective show Monk, where the main character Adrian Monk goes to group therapy. Someone died. It's a mystery detective show, so someone dies in that episode. But just like the dynamic of the group, that heavily inspired the group therapy scene in this book. But yeah, I would say, yeah. But it definitely changes a lot. But I would say probably like various scenes in movies or shows like trigger the inspiration mainly. Eric?
Was there a scene that was especially hard or emotional to write?
Ooh. So there's a scene towards the end of the book where Logan and his family they have like a family therapy session. And that scene in particular was very difficult to write. There's a lot of emotions in that scene, and every character is trying to say something different. So just kind of making sure that like it wasn't too overt, like it wasn't too in your face, but also that like the reader got what each character was going through. Kind of this answers some of your question, Imani, that scene, there's an episode of This Is Us that they're in like a family therapy type situation. And so I would watch a clip from that episode so much to like get those emotions right. I think, and then I will say, a lot of people have told me that they cried reading this book. I didn't cry writing it, but I have cried writing the second book. So that has been like I have a photo of where I'm like this is how this chapter has left me. But I would say that family therapy scene was the most like probably the hardest emotion wise to write. Yeah. And Albert?
More curious about your story arc. Do you start in your writing, how you get from the beginning to the end? Do you start out like the ending and go towards it? Do you start out at the beginning and see where it goes? And how do you stay on track? I start with like the basic concept, and characters tend to come to my mind first. And then I find a story that they fit into. So I'm writing the second book, but I'm also writing a different story. It doesn't take place in this universe at all. And those characters were part of a different concept that I had, but they didn't fit in that concept. And so I'm like, I'm going to put them in this story. So characters tend to come to my mind first, then concept. And then I know vaguely where it's going to end. Like I know vaguely what it's building up towards. Like, for example, I knew that the last page of this book was going to be Logan sort of like reflecting on the notion of like you can't love someone's illness away, no matter how heartbreaking that is. It doesn't matter how much you love somebody, you're never going to make their cancer go away, their depression go away. But how like people can love you through it. So that monologue was always in my head, and I always knew it was going to end with that. But then like sort of, okay, where will that actually fit in? What scene will that fit into? I also knew that If I'm doing a romance arc, they tend to end with the characters getting together. So I knew that had to be at the end. But I don't necessarily like start out with the last scene. I usually don't know exactly what's going on in the last scene until I get to the end. And I do have like scenes kind of sprinkled about that I'm like, I almost get impatient. I want to write that now. So I'll have a separate document of like future scenes. And like there's a scene where they go on a field trip to an aquarium in this book. And that scene is largely the same. And that was one of the first scenes that I wrote because I really wanted to write it. So I just kind of have that separate document and I write that scene and then it's like, okay, now I'm back on track. And to kind of stay on track, I have a like cork board next to my desk that has all kinds of like little notes and story beats. And then I string it all together like a murder board. And like, okay, today I'm gonna write this scene and then kind of go with the thread. But, yeah. If that's it for the questions, we're almost out of time. So if anyone has any last questions, I would love to answer those. If not, then thank you so much for coming and for supporting and for loving this book. Maybe not as much as I do because this has been in my head for years, but almost as much as I do. Yeah, thank you so much. Let me end this.